So I'm talking to Jackie Beaudry, who is the city clerk for Ann Arbor. I want to thank you for talking to me today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So I'm curious, I have asked everybody the same question. What kind of adjustments, what kind of changes have you had to make in your life since the pandemic?
Well, obviously, work-wise has been the biggest change for me. Um, our department, is a public-facing department. We're open, our front counter on the second floor every day, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And so it just was a whirlwind after the presidential primary, March 10th, that everything shut down. And so I would say it took like a good week for me to adjust to the stay home order and, trying to get things connecting with your team and everybody learning Zoom and Microsoft Teams. And so probably within a week, we were having our weekly staff meetings and getting everybody, back together. But that week after the primary, we started making plans for what would it look like, if some people could stay home and some people would stay at work. And then it just very quickly was like everyone's staying home. But a lot of people may not think about the clerk's office as a essential function, but elections are, even at the federal level, considered critical infrastructure. So we're always still thinking and planning for, especially this year, for the August and November election. So that was probably for me, it was just, we're a public team, and so it's not really conducive to not being at City Hall and not being together. So that was an adjustment, I would say.
What kind of precautions are you taking in your household, like with the day-to-day activities that you have to go out in public places to do? Like every one of us is facing the challenge of or the task of how are we getting groceries, and what are your routines in your house?
Well, it's interesting because you probably know, but so I live with a city firefighter. So between the two of us, him more than me, his job didn't change at all in terms of he goes in every third day for 24 hours. So we were not the type of house that it's like, okay, we're just hunkered down and no one's leaving. And then probably in your position, you also know that we were dealing with the filing deadline. And so that was, like I talked about, being a public office. Are we there? Are we accessible? And so we had candidates. Luckily, I only lived like a mile and a half from City Hall. So they would contact me either on the phone or email and say, I need to file petitions. And, we were trying to make all those arrangements so that the business of elections could keep going. So between the two of us, we've, still been out and about in terms of our work, but Derek has done most of the grocery shopping. And I thought it was interesting that I went in early April to Plum Market, and it was like, some people are starting to wear masks. You're kind of aware, not getting too close to anybody. And then I didn't go back out except for going to City Hall. I didn't go anywhere public until maybe like a week ago. And everything was like one way down the grocery aisle. You must have a mask on. So it was really interesting to me to not do any kind of shopping or anything for a month, and how much had changed from the beginning of April or late March to the beginning of May. But Derek goes out and he said the same thing. There was this transition from a few people are wearing a mask to when the governor said, if you're in a public place, you need to be wearing a mask, to where people were if you're not, they're looking at you like you're doing, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you complying?
So your partner, obviously, his work is not something that can be done at home. And to a certain extent, yours can't either. How has your schedule changed in terms of working from home and being at City Hall? What does that look like? I've talked to other people who, for instance, I think Mr. Postema, almost all of his work now has transitioned to home. And so people you maybe are a kind of hybrid because you're not a firefighter and you're not, I mean, you have to face the public, like you said.
Right, it's not like, I know John Fournier, the assistant city administrator, said some departments, very easily, like you think HR, finance could very quickly transition to doing all the things they do remotely. So the filing deadline was really busy for us. And I think I told you it took us like about a week to get going on, we have remote staff meetings, but we do have 3 days a week, there's somebody in the office from 9 to 4. Just making sure the mail's being processed, that we're not getting any, when we were doing, checking signatures for the petitions, and then keeping up with voter registration, that type of thing, just making sure business is moving. But it's one person at a time in the office right now. But for me, and you probably as well know this, the things we've had to do to switch from in-person open meetings to Zoom meetings it's one thing when it's a staff meeting, but when it's, city council and making sure the public has access and, just learning the tool myself. And then the most stressful part of the meeting is making sure I call on the right person for reserve time. And, so even, but IT has been wonderful. And so Anissa, who's my primary assistant for city council, the calls come in to her and 2 other people on their computers at home at 8 a.m. So we try to mimic for the public, just call the regular city clerk number for council night and someone will answer. So those types of things are, to the extent we can, they're remote. And then, but physically posting the notices, we still do that. And so there's certain things we do at City Hall that, in fact, just the other day I had to go in because they had I think it was a Greenbelt purchase that just couldn't be done through the electronic DocuSign. So the attorney's office had a setup outside in the parking lot, and we each had like a 10-minute time slot. So I didn't see anyone else, it was like everyone had been on schedule and just signed the document. And so I'd say once or twice a week, there's inevitably some reason I end up at City Hall. One thing you asked about how that changes our life, I will say that both Derek and I talked about is when I would get home from City Hall now, you feel, I don't want to say dirty, but it's like, okay, these clothes are ruined. They're outside my bubble, so. And he said the same thing. He's like, I don't wear my uniform in. He's like, I have my set clothes that I wear in, and then I change, and then I change back into those to come home. And then you feel like you have to launder that because you were out in public. And so that's also why I think he often will stop and do the grocery shopping on his way home from his 24-hour shift.
Well, that sort of leads to another question that I've been asking folks, and that is, are you taking any special precautions when you simply go outside? Not even going to a grocery store or going out in a public place, but are you taking any precautions when you just are outdoors?
I think I saw your interview with, maybe it was with Tom Crawford. I thought that was interesting, the conversation about what people are doing outside. So we always would go, either for a walk or a run. And now you really, I think not even being at City Hall, like exercise that was in your normal day, I walk in from the structure, you're moving around more, talking to people. If you're a track your steps kind of person, when you're just in the same spot looking at a computer all day, you realize how little you move. So we make sure we get out and do our run or even just go for a walk. But I would say most people that I see outside are not, wearing a mask, or maybe I would say that's a minority. And we don't when we're exercising or, outside, but I guess I was under the impression that the expectation to wear a mask was around other people or inside a building. But, definitely, I know council took that issue up, that I think more people, because they're home all day, you see more people out than I previously did as a runner.
So that's another thing that people have talked to me about, losing so many of the outlets that we used to have, outlets that involved public places, and feeling so very cooped up. I think you probably mentioned a couple of them already, but what kind of strategies do you have to make sure that you aren't just going crazy looking at the same four walls so much more than you used to?
Right. And yeah, you do. You really feel like, it's kind of interesting is I think way back last fall, we signed up for this run for the trees. It was through the Michigan DNR, and it was always meant to be, like, they called it virtual. I mean, you really ran, but it was like, just sometime during Earth Week, go visit a state park. And and they sent us t-shirts and the bibs and a medal and everything. And it was funny when it arrived, it was after the stay home order. And I was so excited that I had something to do. And so they actually planned this, and it wasn't even because of this. But then I actually got an email from the DNR saying, don't crowd the state parks. Like, you can still run, your 3.1 miles in your own neighborhood. So we ended up going to Hudson Mills in Dexter. And it just really, like, you think of your mental health. Like, that was a great day. And I'm like, wow, this is nice to feel like I did something, besides sit at home. And so I think that is having some kind of event, or, whether you go for a walk or, ride your bike, something, I think that it's important to get out, and not just for the exercise, but for your mental health. But, so yeah, we definitely try to, keep up with that.
So would you have any advice for people, or any thoughts for people who are feeling so feeling particularly restricted by these guidelines and frustrated by them? I've asked this question of people even since before the protests in Lansing, but now we're seeing like crowds of people who are demonstrating against this quarantine that we're in, who are literally saying it must stop. What would you say to people who are feeling that way?
Wow, I don't feel like I was just telling Derek, I don't feel like in some ways didn't handle it well. I'm a kind of a quiet, introverted person, so it was funny that all of a sudden I think I missed being at City Hall. I miss having my team and some camaraderie, and we like to go out to eat, and you miss that. But I guess you have to learn to adapt, and you have your family. You have we Zoomed on Easter with my mom and dad are in Ohio, so and my sister as well. So there's other ways to still do the things you want to do. You just have to learn to make those accommodations. But definitely, I think that's why you see more and more people outside, is you do, for your mental health, have to get some fresh air. But we've just learned things change a little bit. But I think, they say it's physical distancing, not social distancing. So to not, whether you're having a Zoom happy hour or, whatever, give somebody a call, or, we certainly across the way talk to our neighbors. And so you definitely want some interaction with people. And missing going out to eat, it's like Nights has been awesome. And not to put in a plug for them, but so we have our once a week, and we did Isalita, and they had a great curbside delivery. So it's kind of nice to plan your meals at home. But if we've also taken advantage of some of the local businesses have had great, whether it's delivery or easy pickup.
So is there anything else that you have to say on this topic? Or I've sort of run out of questions. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you can say?
Well, I know you said you weren't going to ask about elections or grill me on what's coming, but one of the things, I think it was hard for me at first. Like I said, I felt really disconnected and trying to get up and how do you work remotely. But I had been on a national task force that we concluded our work in January, trying to make recommendations moving into the 2020 elections. And that group actually, we've gotten back together to talk about the conversation about what does, elections look like if there's social distancing as people move to more vote by mail. Michigan's no reason absentee. So, we have some of the steps in place for more and more people to vote earlier at home. So that actually was a good outlet for me as well, is getting back together with that group. We used to actually meet around the country, and now we meet on Zoom. So, it's nice to have those conversations. And then I meet every other week on Zoom with a professor at the university, and she and I are always keeping up on what the elections will look like for students and what their plans are. So I actually getting back talking elections was, for me, something that I feel good about. And so that was to start back up in those conversations right away, as an outlet for me, something that, you feel like you're doing something and you try to make a difference or.
Well, I know I feel reassured that specifically you and your office are contemplating all these issues. I think about an agenda that we had at council not too very long ago, where we were talking about funding for equipment for you to high speed count ballots. And I think about that. I think, gosh, there'll be a lot more ballots if it's all mail-in voting.
Right. That's what is. I was just on a webinar this morning about how states like Colorado, it's not just an overnight flip the switch to vote by mail, but then some states are in that mindset of like, well, it is kind of, now what do? We want to quickly make this switch. But that's what's the challenge is you have to plan for, if the students are back, they're likely to vote in person, but you're also planning for how many more people who used to vote in person will say, no, I'd like to take advantage of, voting at home or vote by mail. So we're sort of in this planning stage of like, we have to assume both, so that to be prepared.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. People might not know that you and I actually live maybe 4 blocks away from each other. And I live similarly close to Mr. Postema. So some of these conversations have felt really funny because we really aren't that far away from each other. But
I didn't realize you were that close to me.
Well, I pretty close. I mean, I know where you live because we walked by you when we were on our way on a walk, my husband and I, but yeah, we're pretty close.
Yeah. So I was curious about do you wear a mask if you go for a walk?
I actually do.
You do?
Yeah, my husband and I do, and I encourage my kids to do the same. And we're very much in the minority. We're like we're the only people. When I go for a bike ride, I'm wearing a mask. I'm not as consistent as other people about like going for a walk every day. Like it's embarrassing, but I have days where I don't actually leave my house, and I probably should be making more of an effort just to be balanced in my life. But yeah, I've been wearing a mask. I have fabric mask. We sew. My husband sewed a couple masks. I've sewn some masks. So.
Oh, cool.
You need a mask, I can sew you one.
We don't wear the mask, especially when we run, but I didn't tell you, but I think we probably do it first, but I think everybody has that, you used to think it would be rude, but if we see somebody approaching, we just cross the street.
Oh yeah, I think that's legit as a strategy. That is 100% legit. I mean, I feel like I've been wearing a mask. I maybe take a few less steps out of the way. Maybe I get strictly 6 feet away instead of 10 feet away or whatever. I don't have to be quite as careful. So,
But yeah, I would say, and we've had people either wave or say thank you, and if that's not possible, both people sort of part and, you're off the sidewalk kind of thing. But yeah, for the most part, it's like, well, I will not make you make that, interaction or make you decide to move. So we'll just, okay, we'll cross here and, continue on our way.
well, maybe we will see each other around the neighborhood. And
Yeah.
thank you for talking to me.
Yeah, this was nice. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.